We now probably, I wanted to hear a little more about your analysis of the notion of shocks in 1 minute.
I think I have learned quite a lot from, your, arguments, and I like them. I have also, thought of it, and I would, apart from agreeing to some of the things that you have earlier argued, I have two concrete observations to make.
Okay, yes, we can go on.
One is that, in terms of thinking, in terms of shock and the normal, we may think along a related but a different frame, which is the frame of chaos. And on one hand, this sidesteps the question of the normal and the abnormal, the normal and the crisis, and the shock situation, because in science also, when you think of chaos, partly it would mean that you cannot find an order in what is happening. So the idea of crisis is based on the or it presumes an order, which there is. I'm not saying there is no order, but if you look at the scientific theory of chaos, then you will see that chaos is something which is much more randomized, and it can lead to various kind of outcomes. But I do not want to go into details with that. I hope again that we can take up this discussion today, tomorrow, later on. But the chaotic world is a world where you just cannot find an order, an explanation of things that happen. And there actually your instinct is a bad word, but there your own, as you said, thinking out of the box becomes very important. How do we get out of a chaotic situation? Second, it may be, even if you think of a physical shock, a shock after which the patient dies, it may be the case that, take the example of the huge migrant crisis in 2020 in India. We may say that the mobility that we experienced, social mobility, was not a result of the shock, but it is the mobility which produced the shock. In other words, the COVID crisis and the migrant crisis, India was overwhelmed. India meaning politically, its own public sphere, etc., was not so much about how people would be saved, how they could be saved better, but the whole anxiety was what to do with migrants, millions of people. And as if Indians were completely unaware, at least the ruling class was completely unaware, that we had, let us say in India, by a conservative estimate, we have the number of migrant workers in India, as I wrote in my book, generally it is said that it could be from 120 million to something like 180 million. So we don't have any concrete figure. Now, but certainly over, 100 million migrant workers. So it is the public appearance of the migrant workers in that large number who were returning that produced the shock. And that not only pulverized a stable society, into recognizing, force the society to recognize, look, we were also here. You counted us out. And by the sheer fact of coming out on the street in uncountable numbers for more than 2 months, dying on the street, being completely rolled over by moving trains, dying in railway compartments, losing your way in forests, exhausted, you drop dead on the roads. And then that produced the shock. Now, I'm not saying that is the case, but all I'm saying is that that too is the case. So the shock is at one level, it's a question of appearance. It's like how, and pardon me for referring to Marx again, when Marx was explaining trade crisis or certain shocks in the economy, he was actually showing that, look, how the decadal, appearance and reappearances of trade crisis or other crisis, how these shocks are inbuilt in the market system or in the capitalist system. Now, in our social life, where the biological life is organized in a particular manner, this compulsory and obligatory acknowledgement of the fact that life is at stake precisely because of the way you have organized your life, politically, socially, economically, you have put life at stake. You did not guarantee life. In fact, you ensured that life would be periodically jeopardized and jeopardized at a massive scale. That is the shock of your own comprehension, the shock that your thoughts are poor, the shock that, as I said, the king is naked, that you are powerless, that you have told so many. In that sense, as you saw in my book, I opposed Foucault's idea of biopolitics when he said that actually modern power has ensured life, whereas earlier forms of sovereign power had the power to decree death, and thereby it claimed its sovereignty, that it had the power to inflict death. But now the power is to guarantee life. And he said that doctors, medical, etc., we all know. But I said, no, it was wrong when we thought that there was nobody called Malthus in the making of capitalism, that there was as if no one called Darwin in the making of the mind of the modern, where they were again and again arguing, look, not everything is necessary for the life that those who survive will need. So therefore, you have to expend certain lives in order to save certain lives. This is precisely at the root of the callousness of the power that, under which we are today. So the idea of herd immunity, what is herd immunity? That you have to ensure the immunity of a certain percentage of people to guarantee that there is immunity of society. So to ensure 70% leaves, you sacrifice 30%. This infamous statement of Boris Johnson when he said in the beginning last year, before he himself fell prey to the virus, he was infected, that he said, we are following scientific advice of herd immunity, and therefore we are allowing. So allowing, and a single death is expendable, and by the same logic, let us say 1,000 deaths are expendable, so long as we are saving you. So therefore, you have always this call, oh, in England, the percentage is this, was here, we have a greater population, but look, our death figures are low. Death is always therefore counted in terms of percentage of certain things. This is precisely the way in which you think of shocks. So I think, therefore, the shock, if you ask, is the shock of our realization that the way life has been organized, and the life is organized in this society, actually puts the life of millions of people at risk. That is the shock.